It's honestly kind of wild that survival horror games from the 90s and early 2000s are still scary. You'd think by now that looking at those low poly graphics and jaggedy edges, we would just laugh at them and say, "Holy shit, these games look ugly." But if you go back and play the original Resident Evil, Silent Hill 2, or even something like Dino Crisis today, they can still really mess with you. Even with all the 4K photorealism graphics we have now, there's something about that old school style that hits different. It's not just about nostalgia either. These games were scary because they had to be. They had to be smart about design to make up for the limited tech of that era. I mean, and if this doesn't show you just how monumental these games were, a lot of indie developers right now are actually trying to go back to that style. The low poly graphics, grainy filters, because they know it works. One of my favorite developers, Puppet Combo, they do just that, and they really nail it with the PSX graphics. And the horror feel of these games is just crazy. Very original too. Now, here is why I think those old games are still terrifying even decades later. You're actually helpless. The biggest difference between games then and now is how powerful the character can feel, right? In modern games, you're usually armed to the teeth and you can take a lot of hits and all that fun jazz. But in the classics, you start out completely weak, clueless, you have no rhyme or reason as to why you're there, you don't know what to do. The resources were very scarce. You didn't have unlimited ammo or auto saves or things like that. For example, in the classic Resident Evil games, specifically, I believe it was the first one, you had to find physical ink ribbons. It was an item that was the only way you were able to save your progress at a typewriter. So, meaning if you ran out of these ribbons, you couldn't save. That added real stress because if you died without saving, you could potentially lose about an hour or two of straight progress. Ammo was also hard to find, so you would be hesitant to shoot anything because you didn't want to waste that. It made you play differently, a completely different play style. Instead of running in and blasting everything like we do nowadays in these like action horror games, you spend half the time trying to check corners and debating if you should use your last healing item now or try to make it to the next room very, very weak. You spend a lot of the game running away because fighting just wasn't a good option. The controls and cameras were awkward on purpose. Now, some people will always complain about the controls in old horror games. Hell, people complain about it nowadays. But there was a specific term called tank controls, where you would turn slowly like a heavy truck, hence the tank. It was very annoying, especially nowadays, going back and playing games like that because we're so used to modern controls. It was very annoying, but in reality, it actually added to the fear because you couldn't just spin around and headshot a zombie. You were slow, you were clumsy, and even reloading took forever. It made you feel very vulnerable. Then you'd have the camera angles. In modern games, nowadays, you can control the camera so you can peek around corners and things like that. But in games like Resident Evil, Alone in the Dark, or Dino Crisis, the camera was fixed in one spot. You literally couldn't see what was in the next room until you walked into it. Think about Silent Hill. You'd walk down an alley and the camera would shift to like a high angle looking down at you. You'd hear a noise like the radio static warning whenever it would tell you that a monster is close, but the camera angle wouldn't let you see where it's at. So it forced you to listen really, really carefully and make you very paranoid because you never knew when the angle was going to switch and show you if there was a monster in front of you, behind you, or to the side. Bad graphics were actually scarier. Now, I think there's a weird psychological thing that happened with the graphics too, because everything was low res and kind of blurry back then, so you couldn't see the monsters clearly. They were just these vague, odd shapes in the dark. This actually worked in the game's favor because when you can't see exactly what something is, your brain normally fills in the gaps and your imagination is usually way scarier than whatever the developers actually modeled out. It's the fear of the unknown phenomena. Now let's take Silent Hill 2 again. Let's go back to that. The town is covered in fog. Originally, the developers did that because the PS2 couldn't render the whole city at once. But crazy enough, that ended up being like the staple of Silent Hill and the scariest part of the game because you could only see a few feet in front of you. Sadly, when games look too realistic today, you see the monster and go, oh, it's a zombie, oh, it's a creature. In the old games, the grainy graphics and the dark lighting made everything look sort of not right and unnatural, which made it way more unsettling. Games back then knew how to use silence and specific sounds. The sound design in that era was top tier. They didn't just blast scary music at you the whole time. They used silence really well. Now, I watched this video a couple months ago, or maybe a couple weeks ago, I can't recall, about sound design in past video games and sound design in general and silence in horror games. It was an essay-style video, and it really brought to light how silence is very underused in modern games because we think we have to add kind of like a interesting score or something scary in the background to kind of spook you and add to that scary factor, but silence works almost perfectly. For example, you could be walking down a hallway and hear nothing but your own footsteps, and then suddenly you hear like a window crash or a door creak. Specific sounds became triggers for panic. In the 1995 version of the game Clock Tower, you have this guy called the Scissor Man that chased you. You couldn't fight him, you could only hide or run away, and you knew he was coming after you because you would hear this snip snip sound of his giant scissors. I'll play a clip here so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't tell me that that sound alone is not enough to make you panic and know that you're helpless and you're being chased. Another sound is the very famous safe room music from Resident Evil. When you would enter a save room, this calming music plays. It made you feel relaxed for a second. But that contrast is important because once you leave that room and the music cuts out, the silence out in the hallway feels 10 times heavier. Now I'm going to play 4 different clips because I want you guys to see these really important, iconic moments even, of sound design choices. So, why does it still work? I think the reason that we're still talking about these games, and other games in particular, is that they nailed the atmosphere. They didn't hold your hand. They respected you as a player. They know you're smart enough to be scared about what you can't actually see. Even if you didn't grow up playing these games, if I have any new gen audience members watching this video or youngins, God, I'm old. That's okay, because that feeling of being alone in the dark with a couple bullets, a very bad camera angle, and a noise you couldn't identify is very universal. It doesn't matter how bad the graphics are on the screen. If the game makes you afraid to open the next door or go to the next area, then let's just say it's doing its job. And that wraps it up, guys. Thank you so much for watching this little video about why classic horror games still terrify us. Let me know what classic horror games you guys were terrified about the most down below. I would love to hear it. I love talking to you guys down in the comments below. Let's get on some yapping. Let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.
I think I need a break. Don't care how long it takes. You know I hate the way you make me feel so